Okay, so this step covers some of the fine detailing for the Panther chassis. You're going to need to start out by cutting some strips of cereal box and then hardening them with 2-to-1 glue. So really, really watery glue, and then setting them aside and letting them dry. The reason for this is that it makes it nice and stiff, and it's a lot easier to work with. And the strip should be about 1.5 millimeters wide, but it's okay to cut it by hand. Some variation to the widths is kind of good because there's a little bit of variation to the parts. And we're going to take that strip and we're just going to cut some parts out that are about the same length as these parts here. Now, these are periscopes. You're going to cut out a bunch of them so that you have a few, and so if there's a little bit of variation in their length, you can find ones that are the same length. It can be useful to sort of choose a thicker area of the strip for this, since it is going to be a double layer, or at least that is a little bit more accurate. They're quite tall. Choose a thinner part of it and then cut some for those handles on the front. It's about the same size, but they are a little bit thinner. So if you choose a thin section of your strip and cut off a couple little handles, about 3 millimeters long, I guess. So let's install a layer of these. I'm going to use 4-to-1 glue for this. Do these periscopes here so they have a little bit of time to dry while we're doing some of the other operations. Okay. Now let's attach these two handles. All right. Now there's a couple of tiny hinges on this rear hatch here. So you can find a slightly wider part of your strip. There we go. Some of this wasn't hardened, so let's cut that section off. I'm just going to cut very small sections because if you're larger, you'll interfere with these parts. So you really want to cut these thin. Maybe 1 millimeter wide or less. And these are just hinge bases. There's going to be another part on top of that. It's useful to have a round toothpick. See, that's even still a little large. But it's okay, we can just kick this part over a little bit. We just have to make sure to kick this one over as well. Or we could cut that down. Either or on that score. Okay. Now there is a handle on this rear hatch, shown a little bit differently from those handles, but we'll just make it the same. So a nice thin section of the strip. And just cut it a little bit longer than those ones at the front. That's a bit long. I think my front ones were a little bit long as well. All right, now we're just going to put a second layer onto these front periscopes. Now this part is important to get them nicely lined up. Now, if your cardboard is really thick, sometimes you might only want to put one layer of these on. Now, until these have been sort of infused again with 2-to-1 glue, be really careful because you can just knock these off by brushing your finger across them. It's not a bad idea, actually. As soon as they sort of set a little bit, take some really watery 2-to-1 glue and just bond these really well to each other so that you don't accidentally dislodge them, because sometimes you won't even notice that you've knocked them off and they'll come right off. And then you're painting the vehicle and realize, oh, I've ruined my periscopes. And that will get you to the next step.